The APC-Nemasket Digital Watershed Tour, Chapter 8, Climate Change.
Have you noticed that sometimes we don't get as much snow as we used to in winter? Or that the summers can be hotter than you remember? Beyond variation in weather from one day to the next, these seasonal trends are indicative of climate change, or a change in the long-term average conditions of temperature and rainfall in a region. When we say long-term, we mean super long-term. The average cycle for climatic change is several 100,000 years. For example, 20,000 years ago, the US was covered by glaciers, which could be a mile thick in some places. However, climate change has started to move much faster due to human-caused releases of carbon dioxide, methane, and other gases into the atmosphere. These gases are called greenhouse gases because they have the effect of trapping heat on the Earth's surface, kind of like a greenhouse. Climate change has started to increase global temperatures. For example, since 1901, the global temperature has increased 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. However, not all places warm up equally. Since 1895, Massachusetts has seen a 2.9 degree Fahrenheit increase in average annual temperature. This means that Massachusetts may feel the effects of increased heat sooner than other regions. The effects of climate change will have multiple impacts on the ponds and the Nemasket, and on the human communities that rely on them. One effect is increasing the likelihood of drought. Drought is a prolonged period when precipitation is less than normal, and there is less water available for plants and animals, including humans. Drought may totally dry up temporary water bodies, such as ephemeral pools, small streams, or seasonal wetlands. For several species of birds and amphibians, this could mean the loss of their breeding and feeding grounds, and eventually lead to a decline in their population. Already, increased temperatures and changing rainfall rates are making beloved tree species such as oaks and maples migrate. As these trees move north and west, the pollinators and other species that depend on them will leave our region as well. Increased temperatures can also dry out forests, making them more vulnerable to fires and storm damage. When trees along riverbanks are damaged during storms, they can uproot and cause erosion and reduced bank stability. In our human communities, sustained droughts can cause several kinds of stress. To a farmer, even 2 weeks without rainfall can stress many crops during certain periods of the growing cycle. To a water manager, a drought can affect water availability and water quality. Since the APC is an extremely important water supply source, providing drinking water to over 250,000 people in our region, especially in the cities of Taunton and New Bedford, we can see why conserving water in our watershed is of the utmost importance to the health of our human communities. Although climate change may feel like a global issue that's tough to change individually, you can still have an impact. The most important thing you can do is take steps to mitigate climate change. These are individual actions that reduce the amount of greenhouse gas that we each produce in our daily lives. Start off by calculating how much carbon dioxide you produce. The EPA's Household Carbon Footprint Calculator is a great place to start and includes methods for reducing emissions. Resilient MA, the state's climate change data warehouse, demonstrates predicted future temperature changes for different scenarios of how humanity chooses to curb our emissions. You can see for yourself how there is a big difference between a jump of 5 degrees Fahrenheit under a lower emission scenario and of 9 degrees predicted under a high emission scenario. Every little reduction in your greenhouse gas emissions helps prevent us from reaching that high emissions scenario. The next most important thing you can do is take steps to adapt to climate change. Adaptation refers to individual actions where we shift our way of living, working, or maintaining our property to lessen the impacts of climate change. In the case of drought, we can all do several things to improve water conservation. For example, consider the installation of rain barrels to capture rainwater that would otherwise flow off roofs and run off across impervious surfaces. These barrels provide a source of non-potable water for use on plants during drought. Also consider reducing the amount of lawn on your property and instead plant areas with native plant gardens. Native plants are generally more adaptable to drought than many lawn grasses, which require a lot of irrigation to keep green during drought conditions when grasses go dormant. Become a protector of the APC and Nemasket River watersheds today. Learn the facts. Protect our watershed. Protect our community.